Hello, I'm Robert, and you're welcome here in my busy little shop. On today's episode of What's on My Workbench, I've had a few questions asking me about how I determine where to start and where to end on a pattern on a belt when I'm doing a tooling pattern. And this is not a floral, but this is just kind of an all-over pattern from one end to the other. And I'm going to be putting it on this belt. This belt is for St. John. He was one of the individuals' names that were drawn on my anniversary belt giveaway. I gave away 2 belts. I've made one and it's already shipped. And now I'm in the process of creating this one for St. John. And let me get around here and make sure that it's focusing in the right spot there. I'm not sure if you remember this pattern or not, but this was the pattern that I had developed 5 patterns to try to pick what my belt design was going to be for this year. And this was one of them, and he chose it from that video. There's 5 belt designs I was asking for everybody's opinion on. But this was the number 1, not the number 1 chosen, but actual number 1. So pick 1 through 5. This was the number 1. So I'm going to go ahead and create this. And I thought this would be a good time to talk about how I determine where to start and stop my pattern on the belt. That was a question that comes up on a regular basis. I appreciate you taking time to be with me in the shop. Let's get over here and we'll cover that part of the step. So let's talk about how I'm going to lay out for this pattern. And this is the easiest pattern. So let's start there and we'll talk about that. I don't like to have this pattern run into the buckle end, and I don't like it when it runs into the tip. Some people may run it all the way to the tip and then have the adjustment holes in this pattern. That's not the look I like, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but that's not what I do. So I want this area here to be free of pattern if this is the tip of the belt. So to me, it starts here on this end. And what I mean by that is on this end, I've got the buckle here, I have a keeper, and I have my Chicago screws on here. And what I typically do is I'll lay out here 5 inches from the end of this fold over. So I'll just mark here 5 inches. And then on the other end, I want it to have the same look. So this is my adjustment pattern here, or my adjustment hole here, that the wearer of the belt's going to have. So what I do from there, I ignore the fact that I've got a couple of other adjustment holes, maybe even 3 more depending on what the person wants, but I do that same 5 inches back here. And so I'll mark here, and now I know my pattern is going to run from 5-inch mark to 5-inch mark on here. All right, so to me, that's the easy one to lay out. But I want to talk about, because I have people that ask me more in relation to like a gunslinger pattern or my Western pattern or laying out conchos, how I do that. So let's set this aside. We'll go back to the same belt. So this belt here is going to be for a 38-inch belt. So what I do first is I identify my fold over for the buckle end. And then I'm going to find the center of the back of the person that's wearing the belt. So if it's a 38-inch belt, half is 19. So I'll mark 19 inches. So this is going to be the center of the pattern. Now when I work my way out, I don't want my concho. I consider the diamond part on this belt kind of like a concho. You can use the same premise if I was laying out conchos on the belt. I don't want that concho to be in the center of the back. I want it in the center of here. If these were conchos, I want them spaced the same way. And with that in mind, now I'm going to have an even number of conchos on any belt that I make, so that when you're lined up here, this is the center of the back, you have the same number of conchos on both sides and they work their way out to the front. Now that we've figured out that, this is going to be the center of it. And I want to make sure that when I do this pattern and I go out this direction here, that I save room and finish off in a logical manner on this end. Don't worry about the other end quite yet, and I'll show you why. So on this end here, I'm going to lay out here, here's the center spot and the center spot on here, and this is where roughly here is where that pattern is going to end. So I'm going to hold my pencil here and I'm going to slide forward here now and pick up that pattern. So now when I go here, do I have room to finish it before I run into my Chicago screws here on the buckle end? And my Chicago screw on the buckle end is going to be about 3 1/4. To me, that's kind of tight on that pattern. So what I would probably do on this one is I would run out here and bring my stitches along the side. So it'd be a double row of stitches on both of these. All right. If you wanted to do it this way, you're going to have the spot here and a Chicago screw here. Probably not a big deal. You have to decide whether you like that or not. And it really doesn't matter a whole lot when you're wearing it because the tip of the belt's going to hide all of that. So now that we know we've got 3 of these patterns on this side, then I can just lay out the 3 patterns going the other way. The reason why I start on that end is because on this side, we'll just for grins, let's go out this direction here with it. So I'm laid in the same place here. This is the halfway place on here. There's 2 here. I'm gonna come out here. 2 full patterns. I can count the middle in here. There's 2 here, and we're gonna lay out 1 more. So I'm gonna mark my spot here, and I'm gonna come out here 1 more. And this is where it's going to end, and my adjustment holes are here. You may look at this and go, I can get 1 more in here. Well, I've done that before where I put 1 more here, and now I've got a different number of belts, and where that pattern is going to end is going to be different on the front hips. I think that makes sense. So it works the same. Here's a gunslinger pattern here, and this distance is going to change according to how big the belt is. This belt here is a 48-inch belt. If I had a 46-inch belt, this would be 1 inch closer to here. At some point, I'm going to go back and remove one of these patterns so that I don't crowd here or on the other end. It's further complicated when I make my Western, because on the Western, I have my typical pattern here, which is about 3 1/2 inches between them. But when I finish, I always finish with a half of a pattern here. So that makes this pattern 5 1/2 inches. So if I tried to add that here, I would quickly run out of room. So this distance here varies again according to what the pattern is. And like I said, there could be people that just say, well, I just start here at let's say the 5 inches. I'll just start here at 5 inches and I just run down here and I stop when I get close to these. And I guess I start looking at it and I want it to make sense to me on the pants. And I want my keeper for the jeans, this is the back, I want it to be even. I don't want it like this. That would drive me nuts. And maybe, like I say, I'm just picking it apart. So anyway, we've got to that point. Let's go over here now, and we're going to lay out for this other pattern here, this one here, and I'm going to install this pattern. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is case this, and then I'm going to lay out, find the center of this belt, and we'll go from there. I'm just going to introduce a little bit of moisture here. And I've said it before, but I'll wet the complete face of the belt from one end to the other. There are times when you add dye to these belts afterwards, and if one area has been wet differently than the other, it may take dye differently, and I don't want to have that as a possibility here. So I'll get it all wet, and now that I've got it all wet, I'm going to focus on putting moisture between the spots here where I'm going to be doing my tooling. And I'll just kind of go over this a few times. You could soak it, but it'll hold a lot more water and it'll be longer before I'm ready to do my tooling, and I want to get tooling on this right away. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my wing dividers here and see if I've got the center on here. And I'm going to create a light crease. You have to be careful. Not all patterns will hide that. This part of the pattern hides that crease, but this won't. So I don't want to get too heavy-handed here with it. This is my starting pencil mark here. I'm just going to go down through here and put this light mark on here. And here's my other mark. I come back here and I do this again going the other direction. What this checks is to make sure that if I have any variation in the width of the belt, it won't be so obvious if I keep my pattern centered. So if I had another line that was over here a 1/16 of an inch when I came through here, then I would just center between those lines with this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of tooling here. This first pattern is the Barry King. This is called the double axe head. You can buy the axe head as a single or as a double. I bought this as a double and a single. The pattern goes together like this. I bought this because I thought I kind of needed it to finish the pattern. But in a lot of ways you don't, because you can just overlap this part of it and stamp it this way and finish. So I'm not sure I needed this. I'll probably find another use for it as I go that maybe I can't just swing this around to fix. All right. The other thing, I was talking with Dean. He's another one of my viewers, and he brought up a point that on these rounded surfaces, sometimes when you're lining up on here, it's hard to see because you can't really see all the way around here. It's hard to see if I'm centered or not. And he had commented that he was going to reach out to Barry King and see if he could put indication marks on these rounded surfaces on a lot of these round type stamps that would help you to get centered. This stamp is another one here. You can line up off of this, but it's really hard to see that down in there because it's back underneath there. So what I did was I took a piece of, I think they call it magic Scotch tape. It's Scotch tape that's matte finish so you can draw on it. I put the tape around this rounded surface, and then I just marked here where the center was, and I did that on both sides. That allows me to have a better chance of lining up my design on that center line because I can see where I am there, and then I can bring my pencil line on there. And now I have a centered mark on there. And now this side here marries into this tall end of the pattern, and all I need to do now is keep lining up here. Now, I'll tell you, you can get really paranoid on this, and you're going to put a pattern in occasionally. It just tipped funny or whatever. And what I tell myself whenever I do that is my next stamp is where I fix that. And you just try to focus on making the next one right. Because you're going to have some that's going to happen that way. And this is a fairly busy pattern. If you have a bunch of them that are set wrong, it's going to be obvious. If there's just a few, it's probably going to get lost in the whole pattern. So I would tell you, just focus on doing it correct from here going forward, and let the pattern hide that little flaw. Most people aren't going to see that. You know where it's at, so you're going to focus on that, and that's a shame because then it makes the hobby not so much fun. But I would just tell you, just focus on the next stamp down the way. I thought maybe I'd show you a different angle here so you can see where I've got that pencil line there. We'll see if the camera can pick it up. But on this side, I'm just lining up this pattern here with these two wings here. I'm centering the pattern. Not really looking at the pencil mark because you can't see that center line there. I'm just looking at that pattern and lining it up here on those two marks. And then I'll line up that on the center line. And I will go on down through here. Now, that last one there, I can tell you, it's not a perfect set stamp. I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's pushed a little bit that direction. But if you don't focus on that, no one else is going to focus on that. I'm seeing it right now because I'm like right on top of it. But that's not how the belt is worn. People aren't going to see it from, most people aren't going to see it from inches away. Now, that doesn't mean to be sloppy. I'm just saying I wouldn't beat yourself up about it. What I was talking about, turning the pattern around, I'm finished here. This is where I want to finish. If I was over by a ½ inch, I'm not worried about the centering by that much. But what I was going to do is I've been going this direction. Now I'm going to rotate this. I'm going to overlap this horizontal axe head. And now I've finished off that pattern. So that's what I was saying. I'm not sure you need this one. There's probably somewhere I'm not seeing where you want that, but I haven't found it yet. This is what I've been able to do on each of the different ways I've done it. And these are not cheap. Shoot, how much are these? I'll have to look. This double stamp in the current catalog that I have is $80, and this one here is $55. So Barry King stamps are not inexpensive, but I'm not sure you need this one. So this is the next stamp in the process, and it goes on here just like this. This is really thin. I've still got moisture in my leather. I would probably advise you to let this sit for a while so that you don't end up driving through it. So I'll need to be very light-handed with this stamp. And here's how it ends. So what I'm doing is I'm just visually lining up the these wings on either side of this axe head here. Somewhat like this. And I am just eyeballing this distance between the axe head and this sculpted edge of this stamp. And I'll play a little bit so I know here how much pressure to strike with. And I just kind of rocked it from one side to the other. So I'm going to continue on down here with this. Let me get you a little bit closer here. All right, so here's the next one from a different angle. I guess you could call it an eyebrow. It's a little bit like an eyebrow over that axe head. Now, if I struck it as hard as I did, the double axe head, I would be most of the way through this belt strap. Here's another one of those axe heads. It's not set perfect. You can see the difference. And if you don't like how the last one looked, just focus on the next one. If you have a fairly consistent pattern, I don't think anybody's going to notice that. I'll be back here in just a little bit when we're ready to flip around to the other side. All right, so I'm working down the other side of the belt, and I'm able to, I think, better judge where to place this stamp working from this side. And just as a reference, I would say if I turn it around here, I'd be like trying to crane around and look at the other side to see if it looked the same. So this, to me, is the most effective way, is to work off the off side when I'm working down the center of a belt. Here's an example. That axe head stamp it's not set perfect, but I think there's enough going on here. The pattern's busy enough. Most people aren't going to see that. I guess I'll find out if St. John's a saint or not. He'll probably see this video and he'll say, you got all those mistakes in there. Well, I'm going to tell you that I think, one, picking a pattern that is hard to pick out the mistakes is as important as being able to tool it without mistakes. And working off this far side, you can see it'd be easier than what you're looking at there to line up. I would be craning to look over the other side of it there. So I'll finish all the way down here with this tool, and then we'll be ready. I'll come back when I'm ready to go to the mule's foot. Okay, next I'm going to use this Barry King mule's feet. Seems like it ought to be called mule's foot, but I think in the catalog it's called mule's feet. This is the 0. There's actually a double 0 that's smaller, and they've got, I think there's like 5 different sizes. And I'm just going to use it. A lot of times you'll use it, let me show you on this other piece of leather. You'll strike it hard, and then you lighten up to create like a veining on the plant. But that's not how this one's in this pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up here, and once again I'm just eyeballing it, and I'm keeping that tool pretty much straight up and down, and I'm trying to really strike it the same each time, because it doesn't take much to make the imprint, but it wouldn't take much to drive all the way through it either. I'm just trying to keep about the same distance away from the tips of those two as they are from each other. I think that makes sense. And I'm going to say it before someone else does. Look, Barry King stamps are not inexpensive. And are there other stamps out there that are good? Absolutely. I've been really happy with the quality of the Barry King stamps. I've bent a couple of the Tandy stamps, which probably means that I need to improve my technique more than the stamp needs to change. But these stamps are not inexpensive. I said it earlier, but the double axe head is $80. The single axe head is $55. I'm going to say I don't think you need the double or the single axe head to make this. You could actually probably make it with the single too. It'd take more time. But I think this stamp here is $35. So $35 and $80, and then the veiner there, I don't know what it cost at Tandy. I'm going to just guess $12. If you're going to buy it at Barry King, it'd probably cost you $40. So if you don't do a ton of stamping, I don't know that I'm not going to tell you that you have to go buy Barry King. But I found that a lot of the stamps, the definition of the design doesn't seem as sharp on some of the Tandy ones as they do on the Barry King. So I still think you get what you pay for, but you may not need to pay for this to get a design that you like as well. I guess that's a long ways around saying you don't have to buy Barry King if you don't want to. I had someone say that I was suggesting that if you didn't use Barry King that your pattern wasn't any good, and I'm not going to say that at all. I've seen some really cool patterns made out of nails that someone took a file to. I'll tell you what, I think it's really cool. I'm going to let this dry probably overnight, and we're going to dip dye this, and I'll come back when the dye has dried on here and we can talk about the next step. All right, here's where we're at so far. See if I can get the right angle here so you can really see the color definition. I think it looks pretty nice. What I did is after the dip dry, and this was done in the golden brown. After the dip dye, I went ahead and sealed the belt with tan coat. And after the tan coat had dried for, I can't remember if I did it the same day or not. I'm a couple days later here. I've been on a couple other things. And so after it had dried, I think it was maybe just like 4 or 5 hours, I went ahead and applied the Phoebe's Antique finish on here, let that set for a few minutes, buff that off, and now I'm ready to continue on to the next step here. I let this antiquing paste dry. It's been 24 hours, and I need to put my finish on it, but I think the stitching on the outside is going to be black. So I'm going to go ahead and get my stitching in first. One reason why I like using the dip dye is that there's enough dye in the leather so that when I create my stitching line, I don't end up cutting through the color and have white showing below that. I think that makes sense here. I'm just going to start, I always say it, I lay back just a little bit from the tip. So you can see it's lighter, but it's not the natural veg tan color. That's dye that's in there. When I put the clear coat on there, it will darken that up. But early on, I made a few belts where I rubbed it on with a dauber or whatever, and I didn't have enough penetration of the dye in the leather. And as a result of that, when I cut this, then I cut all the way through. And sometimes the difference in the color is covered up somewhat by the stitching. I'll get these a little bit closer here. But I've said before, it's better to come up short than it is to overcut this tip. I've had a few people question me using these Weaver stitching chisels, and they work good for me, and they were inexpensive. And I guess this is a good point to say it. I try to buy what I think is the best at the time. This definitely wasn't the most expensive at the time, but I was still in the learning part. But the whole point of this comment is I tend to then use whatever tool I buy for an extended period of time. So buying the better tool, I think, is always a good investment if you're that type of person. Because just to set it aside, I have purchased a few other stitching chisels, but with the way I create my pattern, this is the tool that works great for me. Typically, when I'm not working around my phone and light, I usually end up with this in 2 strikes. But I've got limited area here to work. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up this. I'll come back when I'm in the process of saddle stitching. But the main purpose of this video is I just wanted to explain the process that I go through in deciding where to tool on the belt. And to me, it seems like I'm explaining something really simple. And if you're an experienced leather crafter, it's probably simple to you. But it was an area that, I don't know, I kind of got caught up in the details and had a hard time deciding, and didn't feel like I got clear instruction anywhere that I was looking for the information. I just hope it helps somebody in their process today. I'll be back here in just a little bit. So I created all the stitching holes. I'm working on sewing here. I've got one side done, and I'm a little over halfway done on this other side. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the stitching. The majority of this is to talk about the pattern. So we'll see how it develops here and how it looks when we're finished. But I'm using Tiger Ritza 0.08 thread in black on this belt and 2 John James needles here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll work here to finish my saddle stitching. And then when I get that done, I'll come back when we're ready for the next step, which will be working on my edges. Once I have my edges done, we'll be able to put our finish on it here. All right, I think we're looking pretty good here. The next thing I need to do is to work on these edges. I'll grab my number 3 Ron's edger here, and I'll give it a cut around this one. This edge ended up with some tan coat on it from when I sealed it before I put the antiquing on there. So I thought I would take that opportunity, because that makes the rough side of this leather kind of stand up. And this is a good opportunity to give it a little bit of a sanding here before I do my burnish. Just using some 220 here. I have people asking me about the steps, and my steps can vary a little bit depending on the belt. Like this belt here, I ended up putting the dye on and then a resist and then the antiquing. A lot of times when I'm doing the edge, I've got it in maybe a different order. So I just kind of play it by ear on some of these. And this was a good opportunity to get this sanded up a little bit here before the burnish. So I'm going to go ahead and finish burnishing this. I've got a pretty good shine on that, just that one area there. I'll continue that all the way around, and I'm going to touch up this edge. I haven't decided. I may use a dark brown dye on the edge, or I may use black, kind of maybe tie in this design here in the middle. So I'll come back once I have the, well, I'll show you how I apply the dye on the edge here. I'll be right back. All right, I let that dry, and now I'm going to touch up this edge. I'm just going to use a Q-tip, and I make sure it's wound on there pretty tight. And when I get it into the Q-tip, I don't press out here because you may get material come out more than you want. I'm down here kind of towards the base of it. And I just kind of find where I can get the dye there. Then after you get a ways down here and you've used up dye on there, then you can move up into that area. But if you, and the markers aren't perfect either, but if you press real hard, you'll have dye on there. So I'm going to start here kind of at the edge and use up some of the dye out of here. And then I will move on up it. So I'm just going to keep going here. And I decided to put black on the edge here. I'll warn you, practice on some scraps doing this. First couple times I did it, I had dye all over the front of my belt, and I wasn't terribly happy. But I had the same amount of bad luck trying to use those refillable markers too. So I probably needed to just try them a little bit more. But one of them had set for a while. When I touched it on here, a bunch of it ran out. So I'm just like, you know, I'm done. This works nice, and I don't have to worry about it drying out if it's a color I haven't used in a while. And I don't think there's much wasted in this Q-tip when I toss it in the trash when I'm done here. All right, a little bit of Resin on here. I hit these edges pretty good while I'm here. I keep working it here until it's all even. All right, I'll hang it up a little, let it dry. All right, so I'm down here doing my final assembly. And I'm not covering every single step here on this process. I've covered mostly the design and centering of the tooling pattern here. And when I get this assembled, we'll take a look at the completed belt. But I want to say that if you're looking for a complete video on creating a two-layer belt, then go back and look at my video from the 11th of January this year, and it covers every step from cutting the straps to creating the two-layer belt. On it, there was some tooling, but I didn't spend much time on there because I thought a lot of people have questions regarding centering and where to start and stop on their tooling. So, and I've said it, I'll say it again. This is how I do it. I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. There's a lot of people out there that probably have their own way of creating that tooling design on there. Take a look here. So here's the completed pattern, and there's the adjustment holes. So the distance from here to the beginning is equal to the adjustment hole that is used and the beginning. Let's do my test fit here. So the pattern is going to end up on the same place on the wearer's hips on each side. Like I said, it probably isn't that critical on a pattern like this. You could run that pattern all the way there. You could run it to the tip if you wanted and put your adjustments holes in there. But the belts that I create, most of them have like a design in the middle that is repeated, like the Western is every about 3 inches. The Gunslinger is about every 5 inches. And if you're just putting conchos, once again, I would start whatever the distance is. So to figure that, you would do this same figuring to find out from the beginning to the end. And then if that is the distance you want, then you divide that by the number of conchos that you're going to put in there, and then you know your spacing difference. Whatever that number is, then I would find the center like we did on this belt on the back. And then if it, say, was 6 inches between conchos, then I would do 3 on this side, 3 on that side. And now we're 6 inches apart. And then I would continue each 6 inches this way and each 6 inches this way. Let's turn the camera around here for a second. So what do you think? I think it came out really just, I think it's a striking belt. When I first created some patterns, trying to figure out what was going to be the belt that I showcased at my artisan shows this year, I asked, and this one didn't have as many votes as the other, but St. John saw this and really liked it. And when I created the pattern, I didn't have stitching on my sample, and I thought that the pattern looked a little bit too narrow on there, but with the stitching on there, I think it really turned out nice. This is in golden brown. It does have antiquing on it, so it darkened up the golden brown a little bit from that. It's got one of my stainless steel buckles on there. I just think it really turned out nice. You could have so many options. You could have contrasting color in the stitching. You could do, I make a turquoise antique paste. I think that would look really cool against a black one. So the issue with this is I think the options are almost endless. So I hope you enjoyed it. I do need to come up with a name for this. So if you've got an idea for a name for this one here, I've got some ideas, but I like to name them so that when someone calls in, they're not like, I'm looking for they know the name, instead of like, it's the one you did on the, whatever. Now, on this video, it was mainly about centering the design. I hope that clarified that. When I first started trying to figure out where to put the conchos, in my mind, first I was starting with like 5 conchos, and that doesn't work very well because you have to have one center in the back. I've already talked about that. I don't want to keep going there. But if you want to know more about like just construction of belts, the video I put out on January the 11th, and I'm going to put a link at the end of this video, and it'll be a playlist of my different belts. And that one is in there. So if you go to the playlist, it has all the different belt topics in there. So that'll help you find that if you want to know more about just the construction of the belt. I go all the way from cutting the straps to finished belt like this. I think I've rambled on here enough. I do appreciate you taking time to watch the video today. Please like, share, and subscribe. But more importantly, I do hope you're having a great day. Thanks.